You're listening to Out of the Box, a place for marketers to get inspired, get going, and break out of the box.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Jess Overton. You're listening to Out of the Box, the marketing podcast exploring out-of-the-box approaches to marketing and growth. Today, I'm joined by Andy Carvell, partner and co-founder of mobile marketing agency Phiture. Andy, thanks for joining us.
Thanks very much for having me on the show, Jess.
It's a pleasure. So, it'd be great if we start with a little snapshot or a thumbnail of your experience in marketing. I know you've got over 20 years of experience, so give us a little bit of background.
Yeah, sure. Be happy to. I've got 20 years experience in mobile. Not all of it in marketing, however. I started out actually as a developer. Going back even further, my father was one of the first generation of computer programmers. So he was, I think, very keen to make sure that my brother and I got to learn how to program computers from a pretty early age. So I grew up in the home computing age in the UK. And I was always keen to make games, actually. So as I was making games, from my early years, like through to when I actually went to university, studied computer science, so I could make better games. And then my first job in the industry was with Nokia, who were at the time very much the dominant player in the mobile space, and they'd had a lot of success with one of their phones which had a game on it. That game was Snake, which most people have heard of, and probably most people have played. And inspired by how popular that game was and how much they saw people actually using that in their phones, they started a games team in the UK, where I'm from, in one of their R&D facilities. So I joined that team and worked on some very early mobile games, kind of before we even called them mobile games. Just I was developing video games for mobile phones. I did a game called Space Impact, which was one of the very early arcade space shooting games on a phone. It was a lot of fun, and I was just very inspired by not just the possibilities to do games on phones, but just these wonderful pieces of hardware. When I joined Nokia, I didn't even have a phone, and I got one, as part of my job. But by the time I left a couple of years later and joined a mobile games company, there were such things as mobile games companies, and everybody had a mobile phone. And so, just kind of been riding that wave for the next 20 years. I'm still super excited about mobile. But after 10 years in the games industry, I kind of took a bit of a change of direction. I took a year out, went traveling around the world, went to business school for a year. When I got back, got my MBA, where I specialized in marketing and found the marketing topics particularly interesting. I thought I would go back into the games industry, but ended up at coming over to Berlin to do an internship with SponsorPay, who are now called Fiber. That was fun, but didn't really want to stay in ad tech, but definitely wanted to stay in Berlin. And I saw that SoundCloud were hiring. And that's how I joined SoundCloud originally as a product marketing manager, and later was running a couple of different teams there over the 4.5 years that I ended up staying there, all focused on mobile and all very much kind of at the intersection of product and technology and marketing, which I guess makes sense from my experience.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit then how Phiture came to be and who your customers are.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I was at SoundCloud for about 4.5 years. I think most recently, before I left, I was built out a retention team, which is like a cross-functional team focused on user retention. And I was working in that team. During that time, a guy called Moritz joined the growth team of growth org at SoundCloud. Moritz Dan, he's now my co-founder. Moritz and I got on really well. We shared a lot of the same passion for growth and data and just getting shit done, fast experimentation. And we learned a lot. SoundCloud was a fantastic place to really flex our growth muscles there and really develop some great experience. We loved working there. We loved working on the stuff that we were doing, but we sometimes got a bit frustrated with the fact that we couldn't move even faster and do even more. And so it was basically out of that slight frustration and just kind of desire to go and do something new and and work across like multiple different categories that we set up Phiture. So we both left SoundCloud. We set up a mobile growth organization, mobile growth consultancy called Phiture, and yeah, that's what we're doing still today. 5 years later, we've grown it to about 110 employees. We're still based in Berlin, but we just opened a New York office as well.
Congratulations. So you said that one of the things that sort of quote unquote bothered you at SoundCloud was that you were limited by vertical. Can you tell me a little bit about what sorts of verticals you work in today?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're working across a pretty broad range of verticals today. We're working with folks like Headspace in the sort of health and happiness category, a bunch of fitness apps, more utility apps like we do ASO for a bunch of apps in the Adobe portfolio. So for, things like Adobe Scan, and Lightroom, and things like this. So sort of slightly more kind of functional apps. We work with content platforms. SoundCloud is actually a customer of ours now, so we're back working with SoundCloud in a different capacity. And we've also worked with other music services like Deezer and Spotify in the past as well. So we really try to work across as many verticals as possible to see, where we can kind of apply the same kind of processes that work, across verticals, and also to learn, where we need to adjust the playbook. We've recently started working with some fintech apps, folks like Tally. I think we actively go after pretty much like every like new vertical that we can get our hands on, really, because it's always interesting to see what works and what doesn't, and then that brings more knowledge and experience back into our major playbook on just how do we do things better across every vertical.
So I want to double click on that a little bit, because I think during your time at SoundCloud, you developed what you called the mobile growth stack.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk to us a little bit about why you made the framework and what the nitty gritty of it really is?
Yeah, absolutely. So the mobile growth stack is essentially what I would call a one-page cheat sheet for mobile marketers or mobile growth professionals looking to develop a mobile growth strategy for an app. So how did it come about? It was like essentially scratching my own itch, I guess. I was at SoundCloud. I realized that probably there were not too many people there at the time who really understood mobile. We had obviously like mobile teams, iOS and Android, relatively small teams at the point when I joined. But relatively few other people in the company really understood the dynamics of mobile. I guess partially why they hired me, to help, evangelize that and help them to make that transition from being web first to mobile first. And the mobile growth stack initially was just a sort of a one slide in a presentation that I put together for senior management, just kind of outlining some of the key levers for growth as I saw them, the opportunities that were available to SoundCloud. And that went down well with senior management. But around that same time, I was teaching a mobile business 101 course at General Assembly, and I sort of made a slightly adapted version for that course. And I saw that actually that was the most popular slide in my whole kind of 2-hour course. So from that kind of signal from the audience, I thought, okay, maybe there's something here which is more, is interesting beyond just SoundCloud. So I developed it a bit further. Just like long story short, like the framework really kind of seemed to resonate well with with the audience of app developers like across the world. We've seen folks like Gram Games, Walmart, Google have all kind of adopted this framework and used it in their own internal processes at times, which is really great to see. Just for those who maybe haven't come across the framework before, I'll just briefly describe it. Essentially, it's a kind of a grid with a bunch of different cells in it. It's organized by, it's got like a few main layers to it. So acquisition, engagement and retention, and monetization being like the core layers. And then it's kind of underpinned by analytics and tech being kind of supporting functions, which enable activities to happen in those layers that I just mentioned. And essentially every cell in this kind of grid is a different activity, which may or may not be useful to a mobile marketer when trying to kind of like move the needle in that layer. So in the acquisition layer, it's stuff like performance marketing or PR or app store optimization. These would be individual cells, and so what it basically ends up with is like a pretty big matrix of like hopefully capturing all of the major kind of opportunities in the problem space of like, how do I grow an app? And I think one of the misconceptions about the framework is that you need to do all of these things in order to succeed. It's actually the opposite. It's like, strategy is always about making trade-offs, and it's always about choosing to prioritize or focus on certain things to the detriment of others. So the message from the framework is not like, hey, look, you need to do everything here, but rather you can use this as a kind of a guide to like the problem space and your potential solution space, and then figure out like which of these activities is going to be most valuable in your business at your particular stage. And we at a Phiture, we can help people to apply that stack and help them to kind of go through that process. Yeah.
Well, certainly, I think it's a very, very comprehensive document. I had the chance to go over it, and I would definitely recommend to any mobile marketer who's looking to really get a concise playbook to check it out, because it really is very informative. I think one of the things that I see across all of the sort of the cells that you could possibly do, and something that you've brought up on a number of occasions, is differentiating UX for different user groups. So in quotes, personalization. And I'd like to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, great.
One of the things that I've certainly focused on in my work, and something that I know that you've talked a lot about, is improving retention at the activation stage of an app. I'm wondering when a good time for app developers to start personalizing really is. Should they be starting right at the beginning of the onboarding flow, or is personalization something that should start later?
As early as possible would be my guidance there. Like the more that you can personalize, I'm going to use personalize in slightly inverted commas, because it could be as simple as having two different variants of your experience, two different segmentations. It could be super broad. But if you're able to get like, incremental uplift on your, onboarding completion rate or activation rate by splitting that experience at some point in that first session, for example, then you absolutely should do it. If you like, always be guided by the data and always see like if you're getting incremental uplift. But if you're able to provide an experience which is resonating with more of your overall new user base by offering a differentiated experience, then my view is you should absolutely try to do that. So what does that mean in practice? Like, well, it could be as simple as looking at where the user is in the world and offering a slightly different experience based on their location. In very simple terms, that would be things like just offering a localized version of the app if someone's running it from Germany, or if they've got German language selected. This would be an example of what I'm talking about. It's not generally considered to be a growth tactic, but it definitely will improve your activation rates if you're able to offer your app in local language. But it could also be things like looking at what acquisition channel did this user come in on? Did they come in from Facebook, or did they organically browse in the App Store and find you? Or have they come from IronSource, for example? And you can offer, you can use that to differentiate your experience too, particularly if you know that you're running certain types of campaigns on different networks, or that you're pushing maybe different value propositions. You could even start to differentiate based on the campaign or creative that they came in on. I know that's getting more difficult with the iOS 14 changes, but still you can do it on Google, and to some more limited extent still possible on iOS. But I guess my overall theme here would be to try to align as far as possible the user experience and user expectations from the moment that they first interact with your brand, which is usually in an advert, through the app stores, so like iOS App Store, Google Play Store, if they're coming that way, then most folks will see the store listing. You need to be consistent there, and make sure you're not confounding expectations that have already been set in the advert. And then, of course, very importantly, in the first session of the app, to start delivering on those promises and reinforcing the value prop, to provide a consistent story for the user. Like, people generally will drop out if they start to feel that the app is not for them, or that they've been missold something in an advert. And this could be way before you're even asking them for money. They might churn.
Right. Do you have an example of somebody who does this particularly well, or on the flip side, somebody who you think could use a little improvement?
I can give a controversial example of a company which has made a lot of money from providing a segmented experience, and that would be Tinder. So Tinder's pro accounts, they differentiate on age. So they get your age, I think, from Facebook login, or they're asking that very very early in the sign up process. And the over 30s, if they want a pro account, they have to pay double what an under 30 pays. So this is just the price differentiation and segmentation which Tinder chose to apply. Now, they recently, not even that recently, actually, it was a while back, but they lost a class action lawsuit around this in California, and they were forced to actually stop doing this. But only, as far as I know, they only stopped doing it in California, and they managed to settle the whole lawsuit with just paying out in super likes, which seems like a pretty good deal for Tinder, because I think they probably made hundreds of millions of additional subscription dollars off of that. So I'd say that's one of the most high profile and controversial examples of offering a differentiated experience and even a differentiated price point. But I can tell you that many other apps are doing it. Not necessarily male versus female, but offering different prices for different acquisition sources, or other segmentation variables.
So that brings up an interesting question as well, which is, how do you choose which segmentation variable to start working on? Do you go male or female? Do you go geography? How do you choose to get going?
That's a great question, and I think that also really comes back to understanding your target market and your understanding your users, and doing that kind of qual research, I guess, and just sort of taking the time to like properly understand what are your biggest segments of users. Now, you can do that also to some extent in a quantitative way, by looking at behavioral data, or maybe your acquisition data tells you some things. You can get some, usually demographic data and things, at least at a sort of aggregated level, from some of your acquisition partners. But to go super quantitative in terms of behavioral segmentations, you're probably already thinking about like doing that later in the life cycle, when the user is already using the app, right? So if you want to think about trying to do some segmentation super early on, I would really recommend doing some analysis or research, to really understand like who your users are, and to try to at least get a feel for like what are going to be some meaningful differences between different groups of users that are coming in to use the app. Sometimes it's as simple as they're coming in for different use cases. If you have a feel for what those segmentations might be, then I would really recommend actually asking users in the app to can be just like a simple one question survey, for example. We do this a lot with customers using in-app messages, to help our customers, being like app publishers, to better understand the users who are coming in and understand why they've downloaded the app. And you know what, like the simple answer is just to ask them. If you ask the user, hey, like, why did you download Headspace, for example, right? Like, they're one of our customers. We've run surveys like this. Now I think they've built it right into their product onboarding. So they ask the user, hey, you're here to, reduce anxiety, or to feel happier, or to sleep better. These are all valid reasons to meditate and to use Headspace. And by asking that question during the onboarding process, you've immediately got a piece of data which you can use to immediately start personalizing and segmenting the user base. And you also get a feel for how big those segments are. You might find that nobody is selecting sleep better, for example. It's not the case for Headspace. It's a very common use case, but you might see that actually some of your assumptions are wrong. So asking users and talking to users is also a great way to clarify whether you're on the right track with your segmentation strategy.
I'm interested a little bit in how that conversation went with some of your clients. You don't have to get into specifics, but it seems such an obvious and simple solution to just ask the users, but it seems to be one that really it isn't the default. How does that conversation go?
Yeah, it's crazy, really. I think it's just maybe a symptom of the fact that we're working in quite a techie space, all in all, and so a lot of techie VC funded companies that are kind of tech first. It's not always the first thing that techie founders, particularly, or techie like founding teams, they don't default to like thinking about actually going and talking to users. They're maybe focused on building a really cool technical solution to a problem which maybe they assume or know exists, and they validate it by running some ads and getting some users in, and they can see the numbers going up. This is all great, and quantitative data is super important. I'm definitely not arguing against quant, but I do feel that qual research and just talking to users, it's really that simple, is often overlooked, even in fairly late stage companies. Like it's definitely not the default often. I honestly don't know why, because it seems very simple. But what I can say is, like, one of the best things that my boss at SoundCloud, when I first joined, what he did, he made me actually work, like sit and work customer support, like basically shadowing a customer support person for an afternoon, just to see what real users were writing in and complaining about. I really, really can recommend this. It's very eye opening just to just get a feel for what's important to users. Like, just look at customer support emails for a day. And secondly, I was actually tasked in my first week or two with actually speaking to maybe 10, 12 users. I can't remember how many I spoke to in the end, but basically we just like pulled a database list of users who had some certain characteristics. I then like reached out to them by email and said, hey, would you mind getting on the phone and having a chat? I just started at SoundCloud. I'd like to understand, X and Y better. And I had, half a dozen, well, more than half a dozen, I think, phone calls with real people. And that was such a great onboarding to doing marketing at SoundCloud, because very from the get-go, I was really had such a richer understanding of these, the use cases and the users and the pain points, as well as, I think, a lot more kind of care and empathy for actually being able to, not just consider all of these, millions of users to be just numbers, but actually like to understand that they're, just on a basic level, that they're real people and with real emotions. And I'm rambling now, but I would highly recommend.
I love that strategy
Yeah,
of talking to users, getting out, and even if it's phone calls, if it's in app, whatever, asking users is it seems the obvious choice, and yet so few do it. So definitely a great tip. I want to loop back
yeah.
a little bit to what you were talking about on Tinder, because it occurs to me that with apps that have primarily ad-based monetization strategies versus those who have in-app purchase or app subscription business models, there's likely to be a relatively different onboarding flow. Can you talk to me a little bit about how the business model affects a segmented UX strategy?
Yeah, so let's think about that, right? So if an app is essentially monetizing through an attention based model, then first of all you want as many people to be in a situation where they can experience and view ads, like pretty much right from the get go, and you want to maybe bring them through the onboarding relatively quickly. You certainly don't want to put any sort of hard blockers in the way. You might actually want to think about not even this is a controversial one, but you might want to think about like not putting a registration wall even in the way. You might have like a more of a soft registration process where people can sign up, but it's more of an optional thing rather than like a hard registration wall. You want to get ad impressions basically, right? Versus like if you're selling subscriptions and if that's your primary model and the one that you're putting a big bet on, subscription revenue, which a lot of folks are putting a big bet on these days, then your priorities change a little bit in terms of the experience, because you really want to get people into a free trial. If you're doing a trial, maybe it's even just like, you pay or you go, but it favors a tougher approach and hitting people with paywalls early and often, and possibly even a hard paywall with no option to proceed without a free trial. You would never consider that if you're trying to monetize through ads, because you'd want at least the ad revenue, even if you're selling subscriptions on top. But if it's a pure subscription play, then what we see is that you're probably going to get the most people into subscriptions if you hit them with a paywall that they can't pass without at least signing up for a trial. You're going to have a huge dropout rate there. But at least you'll get more people signing up for a trial the moment they've just installed than you will later. So probably that's, you hit them with a hard paywall maybe right after some basic product onboarding.
Gotcha. And one of the things that you said there was as more and more people are betting on a subscription revenue model, is that a trend that you're seeing grow? And if so, why do you think that is?
Yes. Yeah, we definitely see almost every category outside of games is either they already have an existing subscription model which is doing pretty well for them, or they are experimenting with and launching subscription services, because it's recurring revenue. It's nice to have, and it generally does pay a lot better than either trying to sort of constantly drip feed in-app purchases. And obviously games is the big exception. Games has managed pretty well to sort of be, in some cases, insanely profitable by monetizing essentially 5% of the audience, with the whales who are going to spend possibly even hundreds of dollars on in-app purchases, making very regular purchases of coins and upgrades and things. Games still hasn't really, I think, cracked subscription model. We've seen some attempts with kind of all you can eat game subscription services and things, but doesn't seem to have really replaced the model. But every other category is trying to do subscriptions. And yeah, I mean, it's, I think it makes a lot of sense, from a business perspective. Everyone likes recurring revenue, first of all. Secondly, Apple and Google have made the subscription ecosystem pretty attractive and pretty relatively low friction for developers. Definitely not going to say no friction. Obviously there's still a fair bit of work to implement subscriptions properly in your app, but there are also third-party tools out there, platforms like Revenue Cat and Purchasely and others, which take away some of that complexity from the developer and make it a little bit more plug and play. I think it's also attractive for the business because it's predictable revenue. It's not just that it's recurring, but like it's much easier to start to estimate LTV of a user when you're billing them on a monthly basis or whatever, rather than trying to guess when they're next going to purchase or click on an ad or something like this. So yeah, but we do see some hybrid models as well, where like I've seen some success. I think there's an interior design app called Planner 5D. Which they have a subscription. They have like a pro plan, but then they also have a few in-app purchases as well for various bits and pieces. You can buy like an extended catalog with a one-off purchase and a couple of other bits. And I think I'm not sure about this, but I think they have ads in there as well, and you can pay to disable the ads. Anyway.
So they've gone for a much more hybrid model.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely see folks who have in-app purchases, subscriptions, and ad monetization, and are trying to make all of those work. But most folks are just betting on subscription.
Right, gotcha. I know you've talked a lot in public I guess, about retention strategies and how you keep users coming back. As you mentioned, recurring revenue certainly as a subscription is a much shorter line to draw between subscription and recurring revenue as opposed to the ad based model and retention. And I'm wondering how the best practices are different in terms of preserving customer engagement and retention in a subscription model rather than an ad based model. Given that subscription is great until if somebody realizes they're not getting any value from the app, or they're not using the app, then of course they're going to cancel, right? They're going to churn out.
Yeah, this is an interesting point, an interesting topic actually. I have an opinion on that, which is that actually your approach shouldn't vary that much actually, depending on whether they're in a subscription or it's an ad-based model. Either way, I firmly believe that longer term you're going to win by providing a great experience to your users, providing value on an ongoing basis, letting them know and reminding them about that value, by suggesting new content, or in other ways bringing them back with relevant, timely, messaging, which is on point and hopefully personalized, and providing a great experience within the app whenever the user does come back, whatever that cadence is, and that whatever the cadence of their subscription is, if they're on a subscription, they should be coming back and appreciating the value of the app, often enough that they don't feel like, oh, okay, this is a waste of time, I'm going to cancel it, right? And that should be more or less the same set of mechanics that you're employing in terms of building an engaging product, having regular content refreshes or live ops or whatever it is, doing great lifecycle marketing and retention marketing on an ongoing basis. All of those things shouldn't really matter what subscription, what monetization model you're on. However, there is a school of thought, of course, and relatively profitable one, which just says like, let's let sleeping dogs lie. If you see that a user is happily renewing, or that their subscription keeps renewing on an ongoing basis, even though you haven't seen them in the app for 6 months, you can just be like, well, okay, we're not going to send them any emails. We're not going to, we'll put them in the quiet track, and this is how gym memberships work. The gym doesn't call you up every 5 minutes to say, hey, we haven't seen you in a while. Like, do you want to come and get on the exercise bike? Like, no, they're very happy to sell way more subscriptions than they could fit people in a physical gym. And that's the whole model, but I don't think it's super sustainable. I don't think it's very ethical, frankly. And, for apps to do this. But I totally see it can work. I think I was pleased to see that Netflix actually took a strong position on this. They actually will auto cancel your Netflix subscription if they see that you've been dormant for some period of time. I can't remember what the period is, but they're definitely not just going to let you pay for it forever.
Right.
I do think there are a couple of things which you can do additionally, when there's a subscription model in place, and that's to let people know when they're coming up for a period where, like, for example, if you need to take new payment details for example, I know that Apple and Google generally handle this anyway, but there are some exceptions where folks are paying for the subscription maybe outside of the OS framework, and I think there'll be more examples of that in the future. In which case, you might see that their credit card's no longer valid, and you could actually get in touch with them to let them know that their subscription's coming up and they need to update their payment details, things like that, to kind of reduce what we would call involuntary churn, which is where they're churning on a technicality.
Right. Would you recommend leveraging that moment to reinforce the selling point, the USP of the app, or do you think that's maybe a little bit aggressive?
I don't see any reason not to be aggressive at the point where you're trying to close a renewal, or to reduce churn. I think it's always good to remind people why they're there. I just think that has to be also backed up in the product experience. If you've not been delivering that experience for the whole subscription period, then restating a promise that you're not keeping is going to have the opposite effect. But yeah, I mean, if the app's delivering what you say it does, then absolutely remind them of that value. Yeah.
Great. Well, I think that this is as great a place to end as any, Andy. I think we've covered a lot of great information, a lot of practical tips for app marketers out there, and for product marketers as well. I think you really covered a vast range of topics there. I'd like to wrap up by asking you the question I ask every one of my guests, and that's to tell me about a really innovative, memorable, or out of the box marketing campaign that you've seen recently.
Sure. Yeah. So I had to think about this one, and it's not actually that recent. So I do apologize. I don't have a super recent example that's really stood out, but one that really sticks in my mind, which I think was a really great example of innovative marketing, was a campaign which Burger King ran, I think actually already a few years ago, where they did like a location based campaign certainly in certain cities, certain geos, whereby they would ping people with a push notification if they saw that they were about to they were within like 100 meters of a McDonald's store, giving them a super discounted offer on a Whopper and directions to the nearest Burger King restaurant. So basically really hijacking users who were maybe right on their way to go pick up a Big Mac and offering them like a 99-cent Whopper or something like this, some insanely good deal. And I mean, privacy questions aside, I think I think that those kind of campaigns are going to be pretty difficult to run in the future, but and possibly rightly so. But I still thought it was a very cheeky and very successful campaign for them, actually.
That's a great one. I really like that. Well, Andy, thank you very, very much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.